On December 7, 1941, the order to launch the attack on Pearl Harbor came from the bridge of a single ship. That ship was the Akagi of the Imperial Japanese Navy, flagship of the Kido Butai, the most powerful carrier strike force ever assembled. 6 aircraft carriers and over 400 aircraft, the weapon that would drag America into the Second World War. 6 months later, a single American pilot dropped a single bomb through Akagi's flight deck. The ship that started the Pacific War was gone by dawn. For 81 years, Akagi lay 3 miles beneath the surface of the Central Pacific. The pressure at that depth exceeds 500 atmospheres. No diver could survive there, no submarine could reach her. The flagship that launched Pearl Harbor had simply vanished. Then in September 2023, a remotely operated vehicle descended through 17,000 feet of black water and found her. What the cameras captured was a vessel frozen in her final moments. Anti-aircraft guns still pointed at the sky. The Imperial chrysanthemum crest remained visible on the bow. The damage patterns matched the historical accounts: a single bomb penetrating amidships, a catastrophic hangar explosion, 9 hours of fire, and then 4 torpedoes from her own escort destroyers. Akagi was not sunk by the enemy, she was executed by her own navy. The footage has given historians their first look at how this ship met her end. But to understand why these images matter, you have to understand what Akagi was and what her destruction cost Japan. The Akagi was never supposed to be an aircraft carrier. Construction began in December 1920 at the Kure Naval Arsenal. The plans called for an Amagi-class battlecruiser. Japan was locked in a naval arms race with the United States and Britain, and the Akagi would give them an edge. Then the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 imposed strict limits on construction. Under the treaty terms, the Akagi should have been scrapped. A loophole allowed nations to convert 2 existing hulls into aircraft carriers. The incomplete Akagi was selected. Her sister ship Amagi was chosen as well. Then on September 1st, 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake devastated the Tokyo region. The Amagi's hull was damaged beyond repair. The Akagi survived. From her first day, this was a ship that defied destruction. She was commissioned in March 1927. She measured 261 meters long, was capable of 31 knots, and carried 88 aircraft. At the time, she was the largest carrier in the world. But problems were built into her design. The anti-aircraft guns sat on sponsons below the flight deck, positioned so they could only fire at targets on their own side of the ship. The aviation fuel tanks were built directly into the hull structure, meaning any shock would be transmitted to the fuel storage. The enclosed hangar decks made firefighting nearly impossible. These flaws would prove fatal. In April 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy formed the first air fleet, known as the Kido Butai. This was revolutionary thinking. Previous doctrine treated carriers as support vessels scattered among different formations. The battleship remained supreme. The Kido Butai rejected this entirely. All fleet carriers would operate together as one concentrated striking force, the combined air power of an entire nation focused into a single hammer. The Akagi was designated flagship. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo took command. He was a torpedo specialist, not an aviator, and some questioned whether he understood carrier warfare. He was, however, senior and respected. The Kido Butai included the Akagi and Kaga, the fast carriers Hiryu and Soryu, and the modern Shokaku and Zuikaku for major operations. Nothing like it had ever existed. No one had built a doctrine around carrier aviation as the primary offensive weapon. From the Akagi's bridge, Nagumo would direct operations spanning thousands of miles. From her flight deck, the aircraft that struck the first blows of the Pacific War would launch into darkness. In autumn 1941, the Akagi was the flagship of an invincible fleet. That belief was about to be tested. In late November 1941, the Kido Butai vanished. The 6 carriers assembled at Hitokapu Bay in the remote Kuril Islands. On November 22nd, commanders gathered aboard the Akagi for a final briefing. A diorama of Pearl Harbor showed the positions of American battleships, the layout of airfields, the locations of fuel storage. 4 days later, the fleet slipped into the North Pacific. Radio silence was absolute. Transmitter keys were physically removed from every ship. For 12 days, they pushed eastward through winter storms. The weather that punished the sailors also concealed them. On December 2nd, a coded message arrived from Tokyo. Ni Takayama Nobora. Climb Mount Nitaka. The attack would proceed. At 6 in the morning on December 7th, the Akagi turned into the wind. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida launched in his torpedo bomber. 183 aircraft followed from all 6 carriers. At 7:49 in the morning, Fuchida transmitted the attack signal. Tora, Tora, Tora. Complete surprise achieved. The Akagi's torpedo bombers swept in low over the harbor. The The Oklahoma capsized. The West Virginia settled to the bottom. By the time it ended, 8 battleships were damaged or sunk, 2,403 Americans dead. Fushida urged Nagumo to authorize a third strike. The fuel storage remained untouched. The repair facilities were intact. A third wave could cripple America's ability to recover. Nagumo refused. The American carriers were not in port. Every hour increased the risk of counterattack. The decision made on the Akagi's bridge shaped the entire war. What followed was 6 months of victory. Rabaul, Darwin, Ceylon. The Akagi participated in every major Japanese triumph. The ship seemed untouchable. Admiral Yamamoto knew better. American industrial capacity dwarfed Japan's. The only hope was a decisive battle before American strength could be brought to bear. Yamamoto chose Midway Atoll, 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. When the American carriers came to defend it, the Kido Butai would destroy them. What Yamamoto did not know was that American coda breakers had been reading Japanese communications for months. 3 carriers sailed to intercept: Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown. The trap was set. June 4, 1942. At 4:30 a.m., 108 aircraft launched from the 4 Japanese carriers toward Midway Island. The Akagi contributed 18 dive bombers and 9 Zeros. Back aboard the flagship, torpedo bombers waited in the hangars, armed, fueled, ready to strike any American ships that appeared. American aircraft from Midway attacked throughout the morning. Avengers, Marauders, Marine dive bombers, B-17 bombers. The Japanese destroyed them all. One damaged B-26 flew so close to the Akagi's bridge that officers could see the pilot's face before it crashed into the sea. The Kido Butai remained untouched. Then Nagumo faced a critical decision. His strike leader radioed that Midway needed a second attack, but the reserve aircraft were armed with torpedoes for ship attacks. At 7:15 a.m., Nagumo ordered them rearmed with bombs. 13 minutes later, a scout reported American ships to the northeast. Nagumo reversed the order. Bombs off, torpedoes back on. The hangar deck became chaos. Ordnance stacked beside aircraft. Fuel hoses everywhere. No time to return anything to the magazines. At 8:20 a.m., the scout confirmed the American force included carriers. But Nagumo could not strike yet. His Midway aircraft were returning low on fuel. He had to recover them first. It was during this window that American torpedo bombers found the fleet and attacked. 3 squadrons attacked in succession. Torpedo 8 from Hornet, Torpedo 6 from Enterprise, Torpedo 3 from Yorktown, 41 aircraft. The Zeros slaughtered them, 35 destroyed. Not a single torpedo hit. But the attacks pulled the combat air patrol down to sea level. The anti-aircraft gunners focused low. No one was looking up. At 10:20 a.m., 28 dive bombers from Enterprise arrived overhead. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey pushed over into his dive. Both squadrons attacked the Kaga. Lieutenant Richard Best saw the mistake. He signaled his squadron toward the Akagi. Only 2 wingmen followed. 3 aircraft against the flagship. Best held his dive longer than any pilot dared. At 10:26 a.m., his 1,000-pound bomb struck the aft edge of the middle elevator and detonated in the upper hangar. 18 torpedo bombers, fully armed, fully fueled. The bombs stacked during the rearming chaos. Everything exploded. The Akagi's design flaws killed her. Enclosed hangars trapped the heat. Fuel tanks cracked and leaked. One bomb triggered a chain reaction that could not be stopped. Nagumo stood frozen on the bridge. His staff convinced him to transfer command. He escaped through the windows by rope. The Akagi burned through the afternoon, through the evening, through the night. The Kaga and Soryu were already infernos. The Hiryu launched strikes against the Yorktown before she too was hit. 4 carriers, all mortally wounded within hours. At 4:50 a.m. on June 5, 1942, Yamamoto ordered the Akagi scuttled. He said he had once been captain of Akagi, and that it was with heartfelt regret that he must order her sunk. 4 destroyers fired torpedoes into her starboard side. At 5:20 a.m., the Akagi went down bow first. Survivors on the destroyers shouted banzai as she slipped beneath the waves. 267 men went down with her. Japan concealed the disaster. Survivors were forbidden to speak. The Akagi remained on naval registries for months, listed as unmanned. But 4 fleet carriers were gone. The tide of the Pacific War had turned in 5 minutes, and 3 miles down, in permanent darkness, the Akagi began her long wait to be found. For 77 years, no one knew exactly where the Akagi lay. The coordinates recorded at her sinking were approximate. The chaos of battle, the darkness of the scuttling, the hasty retreat that followed. The Japanese knew roughly where they had lost their flagship. But roughly is not the same as precisely when you are searching 3 miles of open ocean. and 3 miles down is where the Akagi rested, 17,000 feet, over 5,000 meters. The pressure at that depth crushes anything not designed to withstand it. The temperature hovers near freezing. No sunlight has penetrated that deep for the entire history of the Earth. The Akagi had fallen into a world of permanent night. This was far beyond the reach of conventional exploration. Scuba divers can reach perhaps 300 feet with specialized equipment. Military submarines operate at depths measured in hundreds of feet, not thousands. The Akagi lay deeper than almost any shipwreck ever found. She also lay within one of the most protected marine environments on Earth. The Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument stretches across the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. It is the largest protected area in the United States and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Any exploration would require permits, planning, and technology that simply did not exist for most of the decades following the war. The breakthrough came in October 2019. The research vessel Petrel, funded by the late Paul Allen's company Vulcan Incorporated, had been systematically searching for lost warships across the Pacific. The Petrel carried autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with advanced sonar systems. Those autonomous vehicles could descend to extreme depths, survey the seafloor, and return with detailed acoustic images. On October 18th, the team located the Kaga. 2 days later, they found the Akagi. The sonar images revealed a ship sitting upright on her keel, largely intact despite the damage. The bow was visible, the stern was visible, gun emplacements could be identified. The flight deck was clearly torn and damaged, but sonar is not photography. The images showed shapes and shadows, not details. And the remotely operated vehicle aboard the Petrel was damaged during the Kaga survey. There was no way to descend and photograph the Akagi directly. For 4 more years, the ship remained unseen. Then, in September 2023, the Ocean Exploration Trust launched an expedition specifically designed to reach the Midway wrecks. Their vessel was the research vessel Nautilus, operated under the direction of Robert Ballard, the same Robert Ballard who discovered the Titanic. The expedition was called Ala Aumoana Kai Uli. 27 days of deep-water exploration focused on the 3 aircraft carriers lost at Midway, the Akagi, the Kaga, and the American carrier Yorktown. The Nautilus carried the remotely operated vehicle Atalanta, designed for extreme depth work. Fiber optic tethers connected the vehicle to operators on the surface, transmitting commands down and high-definition video back up. Powerful light arrays could illuminate the darkness. Manipulator arms allowed close inspection. Multiple cameras captured footage from every angle. From September 8th through 12th, the team conducted their surveys. The dives exceeded 16,000 feet. These were the deepest remotely operated vehicle operations in the Nautilus program's history of over 1,000 missions. The Akagi survey lasted 14 hours. 18 hours of footage were collected. Over 9,000 still images were extracted from the video. For the first time since June 5, 1942, human eyes were seeing the Akagi, and the team was not alone in watching. The footage was streamed live through the Nautilus website. Researchers around the world participated via telepresence. Over 100 experts from the United States and Japan provided real-time analysis. Archaeologists from Takeo University, Tokai University, and Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology collaborated with their American counterparts. Families of those lost at Midway watched their ancestors' grave appear on their screens, Japanese and American descendants alike. Comments poured in from viewers who had waited their entire lives for this moment. The ship that had vanished into darkness was finally coming back into the light. The first thing the vehicle lights revealed was the bow. Rising from the seafloor sediment, the distinctive shape of the Akagi's prow emerged from darkness, and there, still visible after 81 years underwater, was the Imperial chrysanthemum crest, 16 petals, the sacred symbol of the Japanese emperor, still attached, still recognizable. This was not just wreckage, this was a time capsule. As the vehicle moved along the hull, the 127mm twin anti-aircraft guns came into view, still mounted in their sponsons below the flight deck, still pointed at the sky. In the final moments before the bombs hit, the Akagi's gunners had been tracking targets overhead. The attack came so fast, the destruction so sudden, that no one ever trained the guns back down. They remained frozen in their last defensive position. Moving across the ship, the cameras documented the destruction that killed her. The flight deck was torn open amidships. The damage pattern radiated outward from the middle elevator, exactly where Lieutenant Best's bomb had penetrated. You could look directly into the space where the upper hangar had been. A large section aft of amidships showed extensive damage beyond what a single bomb could cause. This was the chain reaction, the ordnance cooking off, the fuel fires spreading through the enclosed hangar. a ship that had torn herself apart from the inside. The ROV also found evidence of the scuttling. Holes in the starboard hull marked where torpedoes from Arashi, Hagakaze, Maikaze, and Nowaki had struck. 4 Japanese destroyers firing on their own flagship. The wounds still visible. Surrounding the wreck, debris scattered across the sea floor. Pieces broken away during the 3-mile descent. The sediment was visibly disturbed by impact. The survey team spent 14 hours documenting everything. Chief Scientist Daniel Wagner described bringing to light features in great detail, including armament, battle damage, and sinking-related damage. The gun still pointed up. The crest still marked the bow. The damage still radiated from that single point of impact. 81 years of darkness, and the Akagi still bore witness to the 5 minutes that destroyed her. Act 6. The weight of what was found. The Akagi is not just a shipwreck, she is a grave. 267 Japanese sailors went down with the carrier. Their remains are still there, somewhere within the twisted metal and collapsed compartments. Engineers who stayed at their stations, damage control teams who fought the fires, men trapped below decks when explosions sealed their escape routes. Under both American and international law, the Akagi is protected as a war grave. She lies within the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. No artifacts can be removed. The survey was strictly non-invasive. The ROV observed and recorded, but touched nothing. Each dive began and ended with ceremonies honoring those who died. Protocols reflected the significance to native Hawaiian communities, Japanese families, and American military traditions. This was bearing witness to a place where men had died in violence and fire. Japanese Minister Kosei Nomura spoke to the meaning of the moment. "We meet on those same Pacific waters in which Japan and the US once met in battle," he said, "but this time as allies and fellow researchers." The live stream brought unexpected closure. Comments arrived from descendants in Japan and the United States, grandchildren of sailors who died aboard the Akagi, great-grandchildren of American pilots who attacked her. For some, this was the first confirmation of where their relatives rested. The survey revealed how well preserved the wreck remains. The extreme depth has protected her. No storms disturb the seafloor. No currents shift the debris. The cold and pressure have created an unintentional museum. But nothing lasts forever. Eventually, the Akagi will collapse completely, her steel dissolving into rust. The 2023 survey captured her while she still retains her shape, while the guns still point upward, while the chrysanthemum crest still marks the bow. 2 other Japanese carriers from Midway have never been found. The Soryu and Hiryu are still out there, in the same impossible depths, waiting in the same permanent darkness. But the Akagi is hidden no longer. Act 7. The legacy. The loss of the Akagi meant more than the death of a single ship. When she slipped beneath the waves on June 5, 1942, she took with her a significant portion of Japan's offensive capability. 4 fleet carriers gone in a single day: the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, the Hiryu. This represented 2/3 of the fleet carrier strength that had launched the Pearl Harbor attack just 6 months earlier. But the carriers themselves could theoretically be replaced. Steel and machinery could be built. Flight decks could be constructed. What could not be replaced were the men. The aircraft maintenance crews who died aboard these carriers represented years of specialized training. The pilots lost at Midway, though fewer in number than often claimed, were veterans of Pearl Harbor, of Darwin, of Ceylon. They understood carrier operations at an intuitive level that could not be taught quickly. The institutional knowledge that went down with the Kido Butai would haunt Japanese naval aviation for the rest of the war. From Midway forward, Japan was on defense. The empire that had seemed unstoppable began contracting. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Island by island, the Americans advanced. The Japanese Navy fought desperate battles, but the strategic initiative had been lost in those 5 minutes when American dive bombers found the Akagi's flight deck crowded with fuel and bombs. The ship that launched the war could not prevent its outcome. There is something profound about the transformation that the 2023 expedition represented. The same waters where Japanese and American sailors killed each other in 1942 now hosted a joint research mission. Japanese archaeologists from 3 universities worked alongside American scientists. The footage was shared freely with both nations. Ceremonies honored the dead of both sides. Enemies had become allies. The Pacific that once divided now connected. Minister Nomura captured this when he noted that today's peace and tomorrow's discoveries are built on the sacrifices of war. The men who died aboard the Akagi, the American pilots who attacked her, none of them lived to see this collaboration. But their sacrifice made it possible. The wreck itself stands as a monument to the cost of war. Not the statistics, not the strategic analyses, the actual physical cost. A ship that took years to build, destroyed in hours. Hundreds of men who woke that morning expecting victory, dead by nightfall. The machinery of war reduced to debris on the seafloor. Technology has given us the ability to witness what previous generations could only imagine. The ROV cameras that descended to the Akagi showed us the reality beneath the historical accounts. The guns still pointing up, the damage still visible, the evidence of violence preserved in the deep. Understanding war means understanding what it actually does, not the abstractions but the specifics, the torn metal, the scattered debris, the graves that no one can visit except through the eyes of a robot 3 miles down. The Akagi teaches this lesson to anyone willing to look. When she slipped beneath the waves on June 5, 1942, she took with her a significant portion of Japan's offensive capability. 4 fleet carriers were gone in a single day: the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, and the Hiryu. This represented 2/3 of the fleet carrier strength that had launched the Pearl Harbor attack 6 months earlier, but the carriers themselves could theoretically be replaced. Steel and machinery could be built, flight decks could be constructed. What could not be replaced were the men. The aircraft maintenance crews who died aboard these carriers represented years of specialized training. The pilots lost at Midway, though fewer in number than often claimed, were veterans of Pearl Harbor, of Darwin, of Ceylon. They understood carrier operations at an intuitive level that could not be taught quickly. The institutional knowledge that went down with the Kido Butai would haunt Japanese naval aviation for the rest of the war. From Midway forward, Japan was on defense. The empire that had seemed unstoppable began contracting. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Island by island, the Americans advanced. The Japanese Navy fought desperate battles, but the strategic initiative had been lost in those 5 minutes when American dive bombers found the Akagi's flight deck crowded with fuel and bombs. The ship that launched the war could not prevent its outcome. There is something profound about the transformation that the 2023 expedition represented. The same waters where Japanese and American sailors killed each other in 1942 now hosted a joint research mission. Japanese archaeologists from 3 universities worked alongside American scientists. The footage was shared freely with both nations. Ceremonies honored the dead of both sides. Enemies had become allies. The Pacific that once divided now connected. Minister Nomura captured this when he noted that today's peace and tomorrow's discoveries are built on the sacrifices of war. The men who died aboard the Akagi, the American pilots who attacked her, none of them lived to see this collaboration, but their sacrifice made it possible. The wreck itself stands as a monument to the cost of war, not the statistics, not the strategic analyses, the actual physical cost. A ship that took years to build, destroyed in hours. Hundreds of men who woke that morning expecting victory, dead by nightfall. The machinery of war reduced to debris on the sea floor. Technology has given us the ability to witness what previous generations could only imagine. The ROV cameras that descended to the Akagi showed us the reality beneath the historical accounts. The guns still pointing up, the damage still visible, the evidence of violence preserved in the deep. Understanding war means understanding what it actually does. Not the abstractions, but the specifics. The torn metal, the scattered debris, the graves that no one can visit except through the eyes of a robot 3 miles down. The Akagi teaches this lesson to anyone willing to look. After 14 hours, ROV Atalanta rose from the depths. The cameras went dark. The Akagi was alone again. She rests now in the largest marine-protected area in the United States, watched over by the same government she once tried to destroy. Her guns still point at the sky. Her chrysanthemum crest still marks the bow, symbol of an empire that no longer exists. 2 carriers from Midway remain missing. The Soryu and Hiryu are still somewhere deep in the Pacific. The footage shows us the wreck. It cannot show us the men who lived and died within it. The decisions made in smoke-filled compartments. The last words spoken by sailors who never came home. The Akagi sank bow first on June 5, 1942. She fell for hours through black water, finally coming to rest in a place no one would see for 8 decades. The ship that started the Pacific War. The carrier burned for 9 hours while her crew fought to save her. She died the way she lived, at the center of history, refusing to give up until the very end.